Hi guys, and welcome back to Manch Talk. I'm your host, Carla Gericke, and it is a sweltering day here in Manchester, New Hampshire. We are in the middle of a heat wave, and I can't actually recall ever being this hot here. It was extremely warm when the generous and incredible volunteers were unpacking the PorcFest truck a couple of days ago. And in fact, it was so hot, I had to book out of there after a while. So welcome back to the show, and thank you for joining me. I did miss last week, of course, because I was up in the beautiful White Mountains of New Hampshire celebrating PorcFest with a few thousand of my closest friends. So primarily today's episode will be focusing on a PorcFest wrap-up, kind of let everyone know what was going on up there. Are all the wild stories true? Mostly not. And just let you guys know what happened at this incredibly historic PorcFest. And then I also wanted to check in a little bit about RFK, Bobby Kennedy, and what has been happening in the MAHA movement, so the Make America Healthy movement, over the past few weeks. Because perhaps like me, you saw some troubling notes coming out. I did see a tweet go out today where Kennedy was talking about how people using these tracking devices to track their health, that is sort of the path they want to go on. Now, I am so torn because, of course, I see the value of that technology. And as we know, technology at all times is neutral, in the same way that a gun is neutral, meaning that a gun can be used to protect your life against a criminal, someone who wants to take your property or harm you bodily in some way. So a gun can be used for good, but of course also a gun can be used for evil. Let's say in that same scenario where the robber uses the gun in order to either harm you or take your stuff, right? And what's the distinction there is property rights. So a gun can be neutral, as to can technology be neutral. But I do think we need to be careful about this sudden direction where we are going to upscale the government to make it more efficient. And I think we need to think very hard about whether we want a more efficient government. And so these devices, again, can be used both for good or evil. I'm skeptical because corporations have kind of hijacked our government in many ways, and in many ways that is what MAHA and Kennedy are actually fighting against, right? The big pharma. But once these trackings come in, is it voluntary? It is at this stage. But where do we draw the line with sort of behavioral sciences? You know, are we starting to really manipulate people into better behavior? Is that good? Is that bad? I think these are all questions we're actually going to have to grapple with both on a legal and ethical standpoint. So I'll talk a little bit about some of the successes I've seen come out of the MAHA movement over the past few weeks. But first, sorry, I got my thing is around my feet. So, okay, I fixed that. So first of all, of course, here you guys can see, I think you can see, maybe I need to move it a little over this way. Oh, that's so weird. Okay, that is the PorcFest. This was the official PorcFest t-shirt for this year. PorcFest 22. What does that mean? It was PorcFest 22. I have attended 20 out of those 22 PorcFests. And if you had told me 20 years ago that I would have been such a joiner, I would have been quite skeptical. But it turns out I've built much of my life here around my life in New Hampshire, expanding liberty for all Granite Staters, unlike the two-party system that is generally just trying to foist people one way or the other. And of course, we know the art of politics is pitting people against each other while exercising the art of hypocrisy. So some of us are here to benefit the entire state of New Hampshire. All right, what was PorcFest like and what were my highlights? All right, so PorcFest is a week-long camping extravaganza that takes place in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. We typically have between 1,000, 1,200, up to 2,500 in 2021, which of course was the year we celebrated our 20th anniversary PorcFest, the Porcupine Freedom Festival, but also 2021, of course, was that year after we got out of COVID and everyone was stir crazy, and we saw this massive bump of people who came, which was incredibly exciting, but it also put a lot of strain on a very aging campground where, you know, we have been allowed a lot of freedom to do our festival, you know. So within the community, you're definitely seeing some tension. Some people want to move the event somewhere else. Some people acknowledge and understand that we likely would not find something with even the not kept up facilities that we currently see at Rogers if we moved it somewhere else. Some folks are talking about a more Burning Man structure of carry in, carry out, as the informal complaint desk of PorcFest. Someone actually asked me at PorcFest, hey, what's your job at PorcFest now? And I was like, well, you know, I get to do certain projects, and I'll talk about those in a second. But really my job is to be the informal complaint desk because, or counter, I suppose, because people will, of course, let you know. Oftentimes they won't even, as we colloquially understand in perhaps the corporate or civilized or decent world, that, you know, maybe you want to lead with a compliment before you insult someone. They'll just come straight out with, you know, swinging and complaining. And so part of my job is to be that sponge. But there were very few complaints, I will say that too. So I had a bit of a different PorcFest experience this year as well. As I'd mentioned a few weeks before this, I had friends coming up from, they're South African, they live in California, they have twin boys who are 10 years old. Unfortunately, the friend, Louis' best friend from college, from engineering school, actually broke his hand in a rugby match, so he had to have surgery. But Runel and the two boys came for the last 4 days, from Thursday through Sunday. We rented a lake house, which I've never done, so I've never been off-site for any part of PorcFest. Actually, that's not true. One year we did stay at the Lancaster Motel, but that I think was before or after I was organizing. I wasn't as responsible for anything. So that was a really, really pleasant experience. And if we're looking for options to try and balance community needs, you know, and you know, it's kind of interesting. I will say this, you know, it's the same 10 people who always complain. And so maybe that there's a lesson in that as well, right? Like there are just a couple of people online and in person where I see them coming across the field and I got to stand my man, right? Because you have to address these things. But I'm not necessarily thinking, yay, this is going to be the best 10 minutes of my life going forward. But we picked this lake house. Initially, you know, I thought it was about 15 minutes from the campground. Turned out to be 24 minutes, which is closer to 30 minutes, which starts to actually become a bit of a commute. It was, because I feel like I should disclose this as a New Hampshire first kind of person, it was in Vermont. It was in Lunenburg on a beautiful lake, really nice lake house, kayaks for the boys, like games inside. PorcFest's weather was a little like rainy, cold, hot, rainy, swampy. You know, we got a little bit of everything. And so the house was really well rigged to sort of accommodate those different weather patterns that we might see up here. All right, so as it always is, PorcFest, thank you to every single volunteer and person who gave their time and treasure at the event. There are, you know, 3 paid staff at the Free State Project, and everything else is people power, including the organizer or producer this year, Olga Sorens, who, the wife of the Free State Project founder, Jason Sorens, who is a VP in a corporation. She was traveling to the Middle East, to Asia, to China, I believe, or maybe it was somewhere else, for factory work just weeks before PorcFest. And so she organized this huge undertaking with a great team as just sort of her side hustle, as her volunteer time for the Free State Project. So that's always beautiful to see, and genuinely from the bottom of my heart to everyone who contributed, thank you. All right, so exciting things that happened for me during PorcFest was, one, I won second place in the cook-off. And I'm really, really, really thrilled about that. So Carla Spicy Girl Babuti, which I had made this like little cheeky sheet of nonsense that didn't actually end up being put out, but I thought it was pretty funny. It starts with South Africa's iconic dish, Mandela, maybe. But basically it's a spiced mincemeat masterpiece that dances with flavors. There's sweetness from the dried fruit, which was a golden raisin sultana, warmth from the curry spices, with a tangy kick of chutney topped with toasted coconut flakes and bananas. Now, a few things about this. How does the cook-off work? So we used to do it regularly when the festival was much smaller, and it was actually initially a way to make sure that people got fed. So the idea was when people came in, I think it was when it was not a week, but just Thursday through Sunday, people would come in, they'd be hungry, you'd need to set up. So we did this cook-off, which would do several things. One, it would introduce people to the campground in a very casual way. So you kind of get a map with all the campsites, and you can kind of toddle through the campground. So it gives you informally the lay of the land. It's also a way to meet many of the people who are doers in the community, and many people who are visiting who are doers, because it's no mean feat to cook a good meal at a campsite. And I will tell you, I obviously am not an expert because I burnt both my pots, and I'm like, I don't know, I might have to ditch them, to be honest, because I was on a little camping cooker, and that isn't something I usually cook on, and I was trying to get everything hot, and anyway, it still worked out. So the idea is to let people kind of wander through the campground, but also there is a language of love in food, right? So people who want to cook, who want to serve, who want to give what they made to others is actually a way to communicate. And not to get like old Anthony Bourdain on everyone's psyches here, but there is a element of, why did you choose this dish? What does this dish mean to you? What does this dish mean culturally if it's a family recipe? But also, food is a story of history in a way that we can learn from other cultures, right? And if you're a foodie, you understand that cultural appropriation, known as fusion in the food world, is actually a good thing, right? Because that is where we're actually taking influences and marrying it into something that is beautiful. And not to overstate it, that's kind of what my babuti is about. Turns out, and I didn't know this before I did the research to do all the little marketing things, I always knew it was a Malay influenced dish. I knew it came to South Africa from the trade from the Dutch East Indian Company. I didn't actually understand that some of that was slave trade. And so according to the LLM, it was a slave dish originally. But then on top of that, the meat and egg portion, which is the heart of the dish. So it's basically like you take ground meat, you make it with a curry secret mixture, and then you pour egg on it, and then you kind of bake the egg. If you're doing it at home and not on a campsite, it forms kind of like almost a egg custard souffle on the top. And that process of the meat plus the eggs with milk or cream in it is actually from Roman times, was the original recipe for this meat egg thing. And I thought, wow, isn't that interesting? So here's this dish made by a white African-American immigrant to the Free State of New Hampshire that has Malay slave influence, that is also from Roman cookbooks, that was made by like beautiful beef from an off-the-grid farm up here in New Hampshire with eggs from my own backyard, and that I could serve this dish to people and that they truly enjoyed it. My validation was honestly with the people coming around and being like, this is really great. The weather played in my favor. We were in a massive rainstorm. It was thundery. It's a very warm, comforting dish. So had it been like today or yesterday, I probably would have not won. But you know, sometimes things play in your favor. My least favorite parts of the cook-off was that I lost to a dish that my husband did come tell me was delicious. But it was a dessert, which kind of feels like a cheat, but maybe that's just because I didn't think of it. So it was a dessert, it was a banana foster, and so I lost to sugar and rum. Those things are hard to beat. And then the guy who came third actually came over to my tent site with a little offering of his 4 Oz cups, right? So we had these little cups and we were serving them to everyone. And he came over with a gumbo. I took one bite and I was like, oh, this is delicious. And I was like, this is tasty. How did you make it? And he said the words brown roux. And I was like, okay, you know what you're doing, right? But then he took a bite of mine and he's kind of tasting. And it is it's an unusual thing. I think people really enjoyed it because you've never tasted something like that before. But he took one bite and he's like tasting. And then he goes, is there cardamom in here? And I was like, wow, you have a really good palate. And he's like, yeah, I'm actually, you know, we're chit-chatting. So he wasn't like overly bragging. But he was like, yeah, I'm actually a top 100 Yelp chef in America. And I was like, oh, okay. And I beat him. So I'm going to take that win for myself. Why do I seem so excited about this? Mostly because, you know, it's something I'm passionate about and I do actually love doing. And sometimes it's hard to know if you're just doing, you know, things for no good reason, or maybe you're not good at it and you think you are. So this was a little validating. All right, then let's talk about the best part of PorcFest, which of course was having Ross Ulbricht there. Who is Ross Ulbricht? He is the original founder of Silk Road, which was a marketplace which showed proof of concept for Bitcoin. It was a voluntary system that was supposed to help eradicate all the dangers of prohibition in the drug market and also make other medicines and stuff available. In fact, I actually was so surprised and sort of I loved seeing it. I met up with them, you know, at an earlier undisclosed location and kind of came in. And then we have this trail through the campground called Silk Road. And that is where many vendors are set up, everything from like, you know, food to tactical gear to guns to there was a cigar bar, you know, whatever. It's kind of like all the vendors of the campground are on this little path. Some of them, not all of them. And so the idea was, hey, we will actually traverse the Silk Road with Ross and his wife, Caroline, and Lynn. And, you know, and Eric Brakey, our executive director, came. And, you know, we had 2 documentary film crews following us around. I had a crew following me around for half the week. Like, that's not stressful. At some stage, I had to be like, look, just take off the mic. I can't. This is too much. Like, I got to, you know, you were like mic'd and you were forgetting and you're talking and that kind of stuff. So Ross and Caroline walked the Silk Road. He met many people, but it was fairly low key. Turns out most of the people were already concentrating at the pavilion, where it ended up being standing room only. His speech was at 1 p.m. People said they were, sitting and waiting and grabbing their chairs from like 9:30 onwards. His talk was short. It was only about 30 minutes, and you can find it on X and and on YouTube on the Free State Project's YouTube channel. But it was really heartfelt and really beautiful. He talked mostly about understanding that you could be physically in prison, as of course he was, incarcerated for 12 years, also told that he would die in prison, which is actually against the UN Convention Against Torture, because he was sentenced to 2 life sentences without the chance of parole. The Supreme Court said they would not hear his case, and had it not been for this Hail Mary from President Trump, who saw that this man did not deserve to even be in prison, let alone die in prison, and pardoned him with a full and unconditional pardon on day 1. So that was incredibly exciting. We got Ross, up on stage, and he talked about even if you are in a physical prison, you can free your mind by accepting the things that you cannot change. And so he actually talked quite a fair amount about almost consciousness and sort of enlightenment and sort of some of that. I gave an introduction to him, which people said was quite moving and good. So I was glad I prepared for that, because he did show up 2 hours early, and I had like a mad panic because I was in Vermont and I had to like skedoodle over, and it was that kind of day on Saturday. Other people who showed up, also Patrick Byrne, former CEO of Overstock, who's done a lot of work on sort of 2020 election questions. He showed up. He is the author of a book. I'm just going to read the title. You guys make up your own minds. I'm definitely going to read it, but man, it sounds like it's going to be a wild ride. I mean, Patrick's starting to give me a little bit of McAfee vibes, but his book is called Danger Close: Domestic Extremist Threat Number 1 Comes Clean. The foreword is by General Flynn. So, that sounds kind of fascinating as well. And then we did end up doing a fundraiser on site, which we haven't done in many years. I used to do them when I was running the Free State Project. And thank you to my colleague at Porcupine Real Estate, Dominic DeMera, for doing this just incredible spread. I mean, I'm talking like shrimps on skewers and fresh mango and just delicious spread of meats and cheeses and crackers and sautés with peanut sauce. It was really, really nice. We got to spend some time talking to our patrons, and that was great too. I would be remiss if I don't pitch this to you guys, just because that is exactly what I pitched them at the meeting. I would like to put in an offer on this campus that is up in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. There is a campus available in Bethlehem, and I think we should buy it and make it our headquarters for the Free State Project. So I will be more seriously coming and doing an actual pitch, perhaps here or at other places. But if this sounds interesting to you, please do reach out to me at carla@carlagericke.com. That is GERICKE. With our last minutes over here, because I did ramble way too long about what was up with PorcFest, is a reminder, because of the work we did with Ross, the reason I believe he was freed is because every single person heard his story and did just a little bit. So we had these hundreds of thousands of people. There were over 500,000 signers on his petition. So if you would like to help repeat this pattern for other crypto hostages, please go to freeiannow.org and freerogernow.org and sign those petitions so that we can get the ball rolling for them as well. I'm also going to ask that we ask Trump to abolish the TSA, but that's another conversation. All right, last few minutes here. What is up with MAHA? So I talked about the device already. You know, that could go both ways. I see pros and cons. As long as it's not being embedded and you're choosing to do it, of course, as free people with free will, that's up to you. The question becomes, where does the data go and who's doing what with it, right? All right, so we've seen advancements in food safety reforms. There have been significant food safety initiatives to phase out artificial food dyes. I don't want to hear you screaming we should keep the blue and red dyes in our food. Let's not. Let's not go as a libertarian position, well, the market should provide and the market likes the poison, so no, let's get it out of our food. All right, there has been a restructuring of the CDC Vaccine Advisory Panel. This was a big deal. So Bobby went in and he fired all 17 of the members of the CDC Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices. That is known as the ACIP. And everyone freaked out. Why did they freak out? Because that is where the manipulation and the rot is. These guys were all big pharma shills. They really were. And so I think it's great that he put new people in there, including Robert Malone. There have also been a release of updated dietary guidelines. So by the August 2025, we will get a new food permit, which will not tell you to eat 12 portions of carbs as the base way to fuel your body, which of course causes your glucose to spike, which then turns to fermented sugar, which then gives you cancer. All right, so they're going to replace the 149-page version with a simple food version, which will also have actionable advice like eat food that's good for you, like Granny used to say. Two more things and then we got to wrap up. There is a launch of a MAHA Institute and Policy Advocacy. I haven't heard anything about this, so maybe we'll put a pin in that one. And they're starting to do an interesting play, which is pushing these things through on a state level, which I would love to see. Why? Because that is decentralized out of DC, and we should be able to make decisions about our citizens in New Hampshire that are better or worse than the federal government, but certainly the federal government should not be dictating to the Granite State what we do. All right, so that is the very short version of what's happening with MAHA. Maybe not next week because we will be closed for 4th of July, but perhaps the week after that, I can come give you guys more comprehensive information on what exactly is going on there. With my last minutes, I'm going to make a deep and heartfelt plea that you keep love in your heart and that we do not support wars. We do not support wars of aggression. We don't want America to be involved in whatever is going on in the Middle East. The only people who benefit from war is the military-industrial complex. These are wars for profit. It is bad for humanity, and everyone should rise up and say, not in our names, please let's spread peace and be anti-war. Thank you.